It doesn't. There it goes. So today, we're going back into Ruth. After a few weeks hiatus, we are going to be in Ruth chapter 3. So far, we have done obviously 1 and 2. Quick synopsis of what has happened so far in Ruth. So Ruth chapter 1. What happened? Majorly sad events happened. All the men died. All the men died. Which is more than just devastating. It's like tragic at that time, right? Especially for women. So Ruth stays with who? Naomi. Or believes. We talked about making choices in faith. There are comfortable choices that are not wrong, but there are choices that require you to just believe that the ground will be in front of you. Choices in faith. And Ruth decided to stay with Naomi. And so Ruth gets a sweet gig doing what? What is her job?
She was collecting basically the leftover grain.
Yep, she's gleaning. And whose field is she gleaning in? Boaz, yes. Okay. We're not going to go spend too much time summarizing, but that's kind of just a picture of where we are, super, super brief. So we're in Ruth chapter 3. I have a lot of fluid in both of my ears. So this means like just enunciate a little better if I don't know what you're saying. Okay, so Ruth chapter 3. I'll start reading. So Naomi, her mother-in-law, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is Boaz not our relative, with whose young women you were?" So she means he told you to work with those young women gleaning in his field. That guy, your boss, Boaz, effectively her boss, is he not our relative? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself. Put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she, Ruth, replied, "All that you say, I will do." So first of all, what's a threshing floor?
Isn't it where what I remember, isn't it kind of like where the grain is sifted?
Mm-hmm.
The bigger grain or the smaller grain goes through or something similar to
Right.
that?
Mm-hmm. Another word for threshing is like thrashing. And it kind of depends on what the grain is. In modern day, we have a lot of different ways to do this. But you were separating grain from whatever other stuff you don't want, chaff. Mm-hmm. And so the threshing floor is a really special place in the Bible. A lot happens on threshing floors, so it's kind of neat that this is where they're going to be. She says, "Is Boaz not our relative?" This word for relative is translated a lot as the phrase kinsman redeemer. A kinsman redeemer has a specifically defined role in Israel's family life, basically. In Leviticus, it says the kinsman redeemer was responsible to buy a fellow Israelite out of slavery. In Numbers, it says he's responsible to be the, quote, avenger of blood, to make sure the murderer of a family member answered to a crime. In Leviticus, it says he was responsible to buy back family land that had been forfeited. And in Deuteronomy, it says he's responsible to carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow. That one's kind of the interesting one for this story.
Isn't he related to Ruth anyway on that side?
Yes, that's why he is the kinsman redeemer. It has to be a family relation. So in essence, he's responsible for safeguarding the people, the property, and posterity of a family. So in verse 6 of chapter 3, so she, being Ruth, went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law Naomi had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drank and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. This gesture of laying down at his feet is most often interpreted as being a symbolic gesture or invitation to take her in, which will be explained in just a couple verses. At midnight, the man, being Boaz, was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. That Hebrew word for behold is like, oh, wow. Insert non-expletive word. Oh, you like, it's not just like behold. He's like jumping, like, you know that, you guys know that this will hit some of you, won't hit others. You know that meme where Dwight Schrute is like looking over his shoulder and Angela's behind him? You know what I'm talking about?
No.
You know what I'm talking about? Okay. It's when he goes, that like intensity, that is what that word is.
Surprise.
Intense shock, not just like a casual behold. It's just kind of funny the way we translate it, like, oh, behold. Like, no, he's like shocked. In verse 9, he, being Boaz, said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." I think this is interesting because in the beginning of the chapter, you've got Naomi who gives Ruth very specific instructions, like, do this thing. And Ruth's like, got it, but I'm going to take it a little further. Naomi said, wait. Naomi back in verse 4, go and cover his feet, lie down. Some translations say wait, and he will tell you what to do, but lie down and just be there and listen for instruction. And Ruth didn't wait. She took the opportunity to seek Naomi's welfare. How did she do that? So Ruth she didn't just say, I'm Ruth, your servant. She said, you are a redeemer. She's using that word again. You are the kinsman redeemer for my family. She solicits Boaz's responsibility to her family. She presents this need that he is obligated to meet on some level. Instead of just waiting, she solicits not just for her needs, but for Naomi's needs, because he would redeem potentially their whole family. Under your wing, she says. Here she boldly asks Boaz to take her in marriage, which is a kind of a callback to chapter 2, verse 12, which is when Ruth suggests that can someone read chapter 2, verse 12 for me? Ruth?
The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge.
Under whose wings. And who was that said that? That was Boaz speaking, right? Right. And so Ruth is saying, hey, that prayer you prayed, here's your opportunity to be the answer. She says, spread your wings over your servant. She's using the same word that Boaz used when he prayed. She suggests that Boaz has the opportunity to be God's instrument in providing security for her. May you be the answer to the prayer, Boaz, is effectively what she's saying. I just thought it was interesting. In Ezekiel 16:8, God uses the same terminology in relation to Israel. I spread my wing over you and cover your nakedness. Yes, I swore an oath to you and entered into a covenant with you, and you became mine, says the Lord. I like seeing the repetition of words throughout the Old Testament and the way that they're used symbolically, so I thought that was interesting. So, taking a beat and looking at this, Ruth is taking a very big risk. She has just thrown this proposition out. She is effectively submitting herself to Boaz in this moment. Who knows what could happen? Who knows what he could say? She has shocked him, first of all, and didn't get thrown out immediately. That's good. She's submitting herself to Boaz, her kinsman redeemer, and putting herself at his mercy. Boaz could do anything at this point. Knowing his character, I would not make the assumption that he would be about to take advantage of her sexually. It's not off the table. But I think what we've learned about him so far is it wouldn't be something he would do. Ruth has had time to watch him and see who he is going into this interaction, but this was definitely She was propositioning herself in a way that she could be out of employment after this. This was just a very pivotal, risky moment for her. So she's most likely exceptionally anxious right now, waiting on his response. And in verse 10, he says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness," this invitation she has just made to marriage, which would be how he fulfilled his role as a kinsman redeemer. "You have made this last kindness greater than the first." That first kindness being when he is complimenting her back in chapter 2 about her actions towards Naomi. "You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich." He is acknowledging the intense sacrifice that Ruth is making by approaching and asking Boaz to marry her and fulfill that role. Ruth could have gone after a younger man because it's implied that, and it's known that Boaz is older than her, middle-aged, when he says this. She could have sought someone who could provide her security for a long time, who would live much longer than he would. If it was Ruth's love story, however, she would have left Naomi in chapter 1. I don't think that this is some big romantic story between Ruth and Boaz. I think she is thinking of Naomi in these moments because Ruth might live for a lot longer, but Naomi's most likely not going to, comparatively. And so Ruth is picking someone who can take care of her family right now and is legally obligated to not just take care of her, but specifically her and Naomi's line. This is a big sacrifice that Ruth is making because she could have sought after whatever worked culturally then, but something more romantic, something more young and exciting for her. But instead, she's picking someone that will take care of Naomi as well, their kinsman redeemer. She's sacrificing her own future and security to solidify that of Naomi. So in verse 11, it says, "And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." What a compliment. "And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I," meaning there's someone more closely related who technically could fulfill this role. "Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he's not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out." And this is once again Boaz doing his food thing. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. He still doesn't let her walk away empty-handed, which I think it's very consistent of him. Then she went into the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law Naomi said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Then she, Ruth, told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.' She replied, 'Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today.'" So I would imagine, again, Ruth would be feeling some anxiety. She has gone home. She's got to wait to see how this sorts out. Will she be going with this random, more closely related redeemer, or will she be going with Boaz, who will be acting as their redeemer? Naomi's plan, tweaked a little by Ruth and picked up by Boaz, is now in motion. The only question was, to whom would she be married? Would it be Boaz or the nearer kinsman redeemer? The issue would be decided, apparently, that very day. So when I was reading through this, I could not help but notice and reflect upon Ruth's actions with Naomi in mind. Her actions in chapter 3 demonstrate her commitment to the welfare of both herself but also Naomi. So one question, I'll pose the first question would be, how does the balance between self-interest and concern for others play out in this chapter? How do you navigate the tension between your own needs and the needs of those that you care about?
I'd say she was selfless. I mean, she put Naomi first.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I'd be the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminded me of Philippians 2. I mean, it just takes me right to that, let each of you not look only for your own interest, but also to the interest of others. And also, that we're supposed to, the verse 3 says, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others as better than himself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very Christ-like thing that she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one thing I find really interesting is that Boaz is not Ruth's kinsman redeemer, he's Naomi's kinsman
Right.
redeemer. Like, he's not even related to Ruth because Ruth's a Moabite. And if you, not to skip ahead, but like in chapter 4 he says, or whenever, all of this not to spoil, but when Ruth gives birth to Boaz's baby, they don't say unto Ruth a child is born, they say unto Naomi.
Right.
And she was never out to get a kinsman redeemer for herself or for her line.
Mhm.
It was always looking for
Right.
a redeemer for Naomi and for Naomi's line.
Because she could have just married someone,
Yeah.
but she sought out this guy because of the way it would restore her former husband's family and her mother-in-law. Yeah.
That line of, it makes her think of, Christ, like,
Mhm.
servant focusing on others. There's an obedience there, that, like a submission, is kind of the way to put it, that is really, we're told not to do in today's culture, basically. But she went to she allowed an older woman to guide her,
Yeah.
which we also have as example in the scripture. And then she kept herself obedient to that
Mhm.
request from her. And you think about, Christ being obedient, and that's the only way it worked.
Right.
But, yeah,
Yeah.
half finished thought, but there it is.
But you're right. How do you feel that ever? Do you feel you have this need, but they have that need, and they're not the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There are times that I feel that way, and then I go back and I remind myself that, because we live in this world that's a me world.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll think, well, it's not fair, and even in your relationship with your spouse, it'll be, well, it's not fair that he's this or
Mhm.
that, or, that he just gets to make all the decisions, or however, anything
Right.
decision-wise. And then I go back and think, that's such a selfish choice, because Christ being beaten, carrying his cross, hanging on the cross in my place, at any moment could have said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I need me time. I need to be done. But he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't, and I think, wow. And what I go through is nothing.
Mhm.
And sometimes I want to be selfish.
It definitely helped. It pales in comparison. It's my little sacrifice seems small in comparison.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting that Naomi told Ruth this, do this, wait for instruction. And she didn't. She did the first part of the plan. But then she embellished the end of it and was like, we're going to be thinking about you too, Naomi, Ruth took initiative and for the sake of someone else. What ways can we take initiative to serve, I thought? In what ways can I take initiative to serve, and not in like a sit back passive, let me know if I can help, but more of a go and do, like a proactive benevolence, like Ruth. I've been finding myself wondering what are ways that I can be not like, oh, well, you just let me know, okay? More of a, I can do this or this or this. Which one? And if you don't pick, I will. Aggressive benevolence, proactive benevolence. I'm trying to spend more time actually writing down, not like, wouldn't that be nice? Writing down what are ways with this person and this need that I can be proactively benevolent, that I can actually go do something. And it's not this, it's nice to say, let me know if I can help. Are you actually going to call if someone says that to you? Like,
Most moms.
no. Like, if Aspen needs supper tonight and someone goes, well, honey, you just let me know if I can help you. And Aspen's thinking, I don't know how I'm going to cook for my family tonight, or whatever it might be, or my lawn really needs to be mowed. Is she going to call up and be like, hey, Sierra, could you mow my lawn? Like, I'm trying to practice the art of taking people at their word. So if you say, I'll mow your lawn if you need it, I will call you and you can mow my lawn. Like, and it makes me really uncomfortable. But I want people to take me that seriously when I offer, so I'm trying to take them that seriously. It can oftentimes be very uncomfortable because you're like, no, I didn't really mean that. But what ways, a little tangential, but I'm trying to think of how can I be proactively, aggressively benevolent and loving to you. So just a thought. Another question, looking at, what does it look like to live all of this out? This self-sacrificing for another's needs, this proactive benevolence. It's really easy to give when it doesn't hurt or create a deficit for me. But what does it look like to take care of someone to our own detriment, the way Ruth did? Are we willing to give money when we don't know how it will affect the food on our table? Are we willing to give, or are we willing to give money, again, just using a money example, when I don't know if I'm going to be able to fill up my gas tank by the end of the week if I do that? Sacrificial giving requires an element of faith. It is the right thing to do, and we are people who do the right thing. So what does it look like? What would this look like to give, to serve, and to sacrifice to your own detriment? Is that what we're called to do? Am I kind of off with this? What do you think? I see Ruth doing this, but...
You're right, because I think that's what Christ did. Sometimes I think, this goes through my head, that sometimes it's easy to just throw money at things.
Mm-hmm.
Giving of your time, and being there, and stepping up sometimes is harder than giving money to,
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what you need more is someone's time. I lost my husband just over a year ago, and there was a lot of people asking me, what can I do? And mostly I'd say, I just don't want to sit around alone, but people forget pretty quickly. You're still really feeling the loss a year later.
Yeah. It was recommended to me. I had a friend when we were living at Coopertown who had a miscarriage, and not a gentle miscarriage. Not that any miscarriage is gentle, but it was just a lot more medically involved than if maybe a month prior. And it was really intense. And that was her first pregnancy. And someone recommended to me to write down that baby's due date and put it in my calendar for the next year. And we were with her after she officially miscarried at home. And we brought them food. And in the car, Jeffrey reminded me, you don't have to say the right thing because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just-
There's no wrong thing to say, just say something.
I just say nothing. I just say, I'm so sorry. And we went in there and we prayed with her and her husband, and I left a casserole. I was born in Nashville, so I got to leave casseroles everywhere. And we went in there and we prayed with her, and I was like, keep your mouth shut, keep your mouth shut, keep your mouth shut. We just hugged and we all stood in silence and we prayed. I got in the car because I want to fill the space with words. I just want to say and not stop talking, because if I can say the right thing to take your grief away, I'm going to try and say everything, you know. And it was really hard. And we got back in the car, and I put that baby's due date in my phone. And I was like, here we go. And a year later, she was pregnant with the baby they have now, Murphy Joe. And I try to feel that one out, because you don't always know. Like some people, my dad does not want to be reminded of his mother's, the day that his mom died, like 5 years ago. He'll be like, oh, I didn't know it was today. Like he doesn't need me to call. So you got to kind of like know your person. And so all I texted her was, I am loving you and thinking of you today. I didn't say because baby so-and-so isn't here. You know, none of that. I'm not going to assign her details and feelings. And she later on talked about how, and this isn't to prop myself up, this was all at the suggestion of an older woman at church, okay? None of this was Amber's ideas. She just talked about how she felt that she had people grieving with her for the year. She had people remembering that life. She had people who realized that she still has lost that child a year later. And walking with people through their grief more than just that first week is super uncomfortable. It is extremely uncomfortable for me, because there's nothing I can do to make you happier. And I'm not supposed to make you happier, because you're supposed to grieve. Grief is proportionate to love. You grieve someone in proportion to the way you love them, right? So why would I try and snuff out your grief after a week? I want you to mourn that loss. No.
Some people do.
Because it makes them so uncomfortable, because they love you and want to see you happy.
Right.
And I want that. I don't want anyone I love to be sad. But that's not they need to feel that, you know? Just kind of like Ruth or Naomi's people were like, we're not going to call you Mara. Well, if you notice, no one ever calls her that. They all keep calling her Naomi. But they let her grieve, you know?
But it's easy to set reminders too, because our friends and ambassadors are in January. I've got on the 12th of every month, I've got a reminder, text Tammy,
Yeah.
you know, and on Sean's birthday, which was in April, all the group that we went to Israel with, because they all know, because now I know a bunch of them from Knoxville, and I was private messaging everybody on Facebook 2 days before and saying, Sean's birthday's in 2 days. Can you message Tammy on his birthday? So sometimes it's just putting because I'm so bad about reminders. If I don't write it down or put it in and I have something go off on my phone to say, oh yeah, this is today.
Yeah.
To do something,
Yeah.
then I won't do it.
Yeah. Well, sacrificial giving is something that requires faith, and serving other people probably should cause a deficit in yourself. Sometimes that deficit is making me super uncomfortable, you know? And that doesn't make it wrong. Being uncomfortable does not make something wrong, right? So, next week, we will learn that this is not a love story between Ruth and Boaz. It is a love story, but not between them. We will talk more about that next week. Thank you for being here.